The poem Beowulf survives in one manuscript, and this is especially terrifying when we realize that this manuscript was involved in a library fire in 1731 where the edges of the pages were burned. That's how close it was to being destroyed. So there's another universe in which this manuscript was burned in that fire. And not only can we not read the poem Beowulf, we have no idea that it ever even existed. Luckily, we don't live in that universe. We do have the manuscript, and thanks to several scholars, notably Kevin Kiernan of the University of Kentucky, anyone with internet access can, for free, look at high-resolution images of the manuscript, every single folio, zoomed in, zoomed out, and read at their leisure. The problem is, most people aren't actually trained on how to read a medieval manuscript, especially not one as old as Beowulf. So today I thought it would be a good idea to look at the Beowulf manuscript, talk about the kind of styles used in writing it, and then read through one or two folios to get a sense of how to actually read the writing in the manuscript itself. Stay tuned. So here is the website, The Electronic Beowulf, as I said, ran by the scholar Kevin Kiernan of the University of Kentucky. On the left is going to be a Latin alphabet transcription, and then on the right is going to be the actual images of the manuscript itself. If we zoom in here, we can see they're pretty high definition. And then these arrows right here give us the ability to flip through each folio. So this is the first folio, and then the second, the third, the fourth. If you'll see here, the numbering is because this is actually one of several poems in the manuscript, but this actual website begins where the Beowulf poem begins, here with What we garde na right here. This style of writing that we see is called English vernacular. That's what the scribe wrote in, English vernacular. It's basically like a font. Now, we know that the guy writing this was probably a younger scribe, and we know that he was doing it probably at the beginning of the 11th century. The reason we know this is because about halfway through the poem, at line 1939, the first scribe, Scribe A is what we usually call him, stops writing, and the work is picked up by a different scribe, Scribe B, who writes in what's called English square minuscule, which is what this font is right here. So this is Qualmbalocudan. It seems to be the first line that Scribe B starts on. And English square minuscule is a much older form of writing that really doesn't appear past the beginning of the 11th century. English vernacular, at the top of this page, is a much newer style of writing that really doesn't appear before the beginning of the 11th century. So what probably happened here is Scribe A is a younger guy who has just been trained on the new fashionable style of writing that is English vernacular. Again, this style up here with the sort of thinner letters. Maybe it looks a bit cleaner. But then once he got to line 1940, he might have gotten like some sort of promotion or something, was called away to do something more important. And so to finish the manuscript, they brought in a different, perhaps older scribe who had been trained on an older style of writing, that is the English square minuscule, and he finished out the manuscript. So here again, at this line right here, the scribe's hand changes and we get an older, probably older style with an older scribe to finish out the rest, maybe 1,000 or so lines of the manuscript. So that allows us to date the manuscript to the beginning of the 11th century, probably around maybe 1020-ish AD. The actual dating of the poem is contentious, but the metrical and linguistic scholarship points to the early 8th century, probably in Mercia. So a lot of interesting problems arise with this manuscript because it's created 300 years after the poem is composed in a different part of the country by people who speak a different dialect. So not only are they removed in time, but also geography from the original sort of first version of the poem. So they, make a couple spelling mistakes here and there, a lot of names they fail to recognize, and it's pretty comical to us, but they tried their best. Okay, that's enough information about the manuscript. Now let's actually get to reading it. So this first line, What we garde, is the first couple words of the poem. As you can see, the scribe doesn't have a problem with cutting the word off halfway through and beginning the rest of the two letters here, na. The word is garde na. It's in the genitive plural, so of the spear Danes, or sort of just of the Danes, because the first sentence is, What we garde na in jaar darum, theod kuninga thrumje frunon. So oh, how we have heard of the, great deeds of the Spear Danes in days of yore, in Jardarum, of the Theod Kuninga, the great kings, and how they had done sort of great deeds. Ellen fremedon is the word that's used. A couple things to note here. So there are a couple letters, a couple sounds in Old English that once they begin writing with the Latin script, that is, they move away from runes and they start writing in the Latin script, especially once Christian missionaries come. There are a couple sounds that there are no ways to express with the Latin language, at least. It didn't seem like there were letters for these sounds. One of them is going to be the w sound. Now, in medieval Latin, by the time we get to the Christianization of England, the V letter pronounces the V sound. So in classical Latin, it pronounced the W sound, but by this point, it pronounced the V sound. So there's really no use for it here because that sound in Old English orthography is just used the F. They just use an F for that. Now, the W sound, they need a new letter for it. So they actually just take their old rune, win, and they use it as a W, sort of. So here in Huat, this letter right here is a rune. This is a rune, wun. And here it's making the W sound. So every time that you're going to see a W in Old English text, it's almost always going to be spelled with this letter. There's the A sound, and they use that by combining an A and an E right here. This is called an ash. This is the ash letter, and it makes the A sound. So this word is huat, huat. The meaning of this word is a bit contentious. I'll have a whole other video on what that means, so I'm just going to skip over it. But yeah, this word is huat. Way here, and then gardena. So this is obviously the word we, and this is a W sound, this win, we, but in Old English, way. And then here in jardarum. Now this letter right here is a G. I'll zoom in a little bit further. Here we have a G. So INGEARDAGUM. This is what their English vernacular G's looked like. And this word is jardarum. You might notice that this isn't pronounced yar, as we might expect with an EA. That's because this E is sort of just a marker. It's here to indicate that this G is making the Y sound and not the G sound. Because there is a word in Old English, gar, meaning a spear, and we have it up here, gardena, the spear Danes. But this word is a different one. It's pronounced yar, and it's where we get the modern word yore, sort of like in days long ago. So this is jardarum, in your days. But if you write G-A-R, you're going to read that and think that it's gar, a spear. So they have the E in there to show you that this is a Y and not a G sound. Theod Kuninga means great kings. And then here we have another letter that in Old English, they needed to be able to express this sound within their orthography. And there really is no medieval Latin way to make the th sound that they liked, at least. So they decided to import one of their own runes again. And this is the thorn rune. So it makes the th sound, th or th, either of those sounds that in modern English we use the TH for. Theod Kuninga of the great kings, Thrymjefrunon, we discovered their glory, and then Hu tha Adelingas. So here we have our final letter that's not going to be found in modern English orthography. And this we call an eth in modern English. In Old English, it seems to have been called a that, but in modern English sort of editorial practice, we'll generally use this letter to indicate the th sound, and we'll generally use the thorn rune to indicate the th sound. So we call this eth because that's its name in Icelandic, and generally in Icelandic this makes the th sound. So in modern English, editions of Old English will just sort of clarify that and change it so that the reader can understand the phonology a little bit more. But to the Old English, this letter and this letter, the eth and the thorn, both made the same sound, which is either th or th. So here, the eth is making the th sound. And then in the next word, adelingas. So here, this is an ash, thorn, E-L-I-N-G-A-S. This right here is an S. So adelingas. This thorn is actually making the th sound. So adelingas. And then ellen, here, this part of the page has actually been burned off in that fire we were talking about. But this is an N, we can tell. This is an N, and this is ellen, that is sort of a greatness, great deeds. Fremedon. they did. Fremedon. F-R-E-M-E-D-O-N. And then this is not a period. This is just sort of like a mark saying that there's going to be like some sort of syntactic break. It can mean a comma sometimes. Generally, it means more like a comma than a period, but it's sort of one of those early instances of punctuation. As you can see, there's also one after darum. So here it's functioning as a comma. Here, maybe more like a period. Here we have oft, O-F-T, and then here's the S again. So this is really different looking than our modern S. This one trips people up a lot, but this is an S right here. Schild is how this word is pronounced. Schild, shaving. There's two S's right here. Again, in Old English, this SC sort of consonant cluster always makes the sh sound, except in very few cases where it doesn't, but that's really, really very rare. It almost always makes the sh sound. So shield shaving, who is a sort of god-like figure who, at least in Beowulf, is the founder of the shielding dynasty of the Danes, of which Hrothgar is a member. Shield shaving, shavena, and then so here at the end of this word, we're missing the A after this N, but this is the genitive plural of weak nouns. So shavena meanings like of the sort of ravagers. Actually, this word is pronounced shavena. So here's another example where the E only really exists to show you that there's palatalization in the letter behind it. So shavena thratum is how this word is pronounced. S, C, E, A, thorn, E, N, and then there's an A right here that we can't see anymore because the page was burned. Shavena is how this word is pronounced. And then thratum is how this word is pronounced. Thorn, R, E-A-T-U-M. Now here we get a really interesting feature. This word is monerum. Monerum. M-O-N-E-G-U, and then the U has a macron over it. Now this macron indicates that a letter has been left off, almost always an M. So monerum. So the scribe didn't feel like writing the final M, which is pretty similar to a lot of sort of abbreviations that we have today, and contractions. We'll put like an apostrophe or something like that where a letter should be. This is the same kind of thing. So the scribe is marking this U with a macron over it to show that this is actually, there's a missing M right here. Monerum maithum is how this next word is pronounced. M-G, thorn, U-M, maithum. And then this word, meadow, mead actually, meadow, here's this S again, set la. Meadow-setla is the mead seats or mead benches. That is like in a hall, the mead benches. Meadow-setla is how this word is pronounced. Off tach. So shield shaving is the guy that we're talking about, and he has off tach, the meadow-setla, that is, he took away the mead benches, which is a sort of figurative way of describing he ended a time of peace and prosperity for his enemies. That is, he defeated them. And then here, O-F-T-E-A-H. And if you haven't really spent a lot of time with Old English orthography, this E-A diphthong makes the A sound. It does not make the ea sound, except in very rare cases. It almost always makes the A sound. Oftach is how this word is pronounced. And then the last thing I want to show here, this is kind of funny. This word is eisode erl, A-E-G-S-O-D-E, and then E-O-R-L. Now, eisode means like terrified. Someone has written feared above this word, and we don't really know who it was. It probably happened sometime in the 16th century. It was probably not the guy who actually owned the manuscript, because he knew Old English rather well, and this is a mistake. So that it doesn't mean feared, it means terrified. It's a sort of transitive verb. They struck fear into. They didn't necessarily fear something themselves. So not really sure who wrote this, but they have incorrectly glossed the word for themselves. And then this word is an example of the scribe changing something that probably wasn't originally like this. The meter of Old English demands that this word actually have 2 syllables. It needs to be something like exodeerl, something. A lot of people amend this to erlas, that is, he terrified the warriors. But the most recent scholarly emendation that has been widely accepted, and I think is the correct one, is erle, changing this to the name of a tribe that is the Heruli tribe. That it makes sense that the Danes around this time in history would have fought against the Heruli tribe, also mentioned in several Roman sources. And the scribe probably saw erle and thought, well, exode erle, that doesn't make sense. Exode doesn't take the dative, it takes the accusative. This is a grammatical mistake. It should be exode erl. And the scribe doesn't know anything about meter, so he doesn't realize why that's wrong. So he fixes it himself and causes us a whole bunch of problems. Anyway, so that's enough of the first page. I want to do a real quick check on the second page, just so that we can get some English square minuscule as well, because there's a little bit of differences here. Here we have qualm balu kydan. So here we've got our win. This is the lowercase version of it. This is not a P. This is a W. Qualm. Again, this is the vestigial remnants of a rune, the win rune, being used to make the W sound. Qualm balu. Here's a Bealu, and then kydan. Cyan. Kydan. And then ne beith swilch. So NEBIETH. So ne beith. And then this is that S. This one is really hard. I mean, in the vernacular, we start seeing something that looks a little bit more like our modern English S. In square minuscules, look how tall it is. It almost looks like an F. But this is an S. Swilch. Here's that win again. A YLC. So this is where we get our modern word such from. Swilch. Here we have completely lost the word. But we know that this is something beginning with a C, because we have C alliteration from kydan, and we're talking about a queen, so it makes sense that it would be quain leech. Ne beith swilch quain leech thou. CWEN was probably here, and then LIC, quain leech, thou, thorn, EA, and then the win. Okay, I hope that was fun. I hope that was interesting. I really wanted to give you guys a sense of what actual Old English in a real 11th century manuscript looked like, and kind of push you down the hill on your way to start being able to read it yourselves, if you ever want to do that. If you found this interesting and you like my channel, be sure to check the rest out. Maybe kindly consider subscribing or becoming a supporter on Patreon. And until next time, Farathie Yesunde.